I needed quiet. Real quiet. Not the kind where you can still hear traffic in the distance or neighbors on the other side of the wall. So I booked a month-long stay at a remote farmhouse in the East Anglian countryside. Nothing around for miles but old wheat fields, a rotting barn, and skies so wide they looked unreal. The owner was an older man, polite, but with the kind of silence that said he didn't like visitors. When he handed me the keys in town, he held them just a little too long before letting go. "Everything works," he said. "Don't wander too far at night." I half laughed, but then he added something else. "If you see a lantern out in the fields after dark, don't follow it." I asked if it was some local superstition. He just shook his head and walked away. The first night passed quietly. The second, too. But on the third, I couldn't sleep. The wind outside had picked up, turning the wheat into a restless ocean. It moved like it was alive, like it was searching for something. Just after midnight, I noticed something strange from the upstairs window. A dim, flickering light bobbing gently in the distance. It moved like a lantern, someone walking through the wheat. It was too steady to be lightning, too low to be a star. I grabbed my camera and stood at the door, just watching. The light kept drifting, not toward me, not away, just side to side, as if whoever held it was lost, or searching. I called out. The wind swallowed my voice, and the light blinked out. For the next few nights, it returned, always around the same time, always floating between the same rows, deep in the fields. On the seventh night, I gave in. Something in me needed to know. I packed my camera, flashlight, and a portable recorder, then followed the light. It danced just ahead of me, always staying out of reach. The walk stretched on far longer than I expected. I should have hit the property line long ago, but the wheat never ended. Finally, the ground dipped, and the wheat gave way to something impossible. Ruins, crumbling stone walls, half-buried doors, rotten wooden signs, a village, or what was left of one, completely erased by time and overgrowth. I stepped into a house with no roof. Inside, there were piles of personal belongings, wallets, shoes, backpacks, cameras, old ones, newer ones, like mine. Some of the gear was too recent to be coincidence. People had come here. Others, maybe they'd followed the light, too. I ran back, heart pounding, half tripping through the field. The light never returned that night, or the night after. But I couldn't stop thinking about the village, so I reviewed the photos on my camera, hoping I had captured something, anything. There was no lantern. Not a single frame showed it. But there was something else. In the background of almost every picture, a figure, blurry at first, distant, then closer, closer, until the final image. It wasn't behind me in the field. It was behind me in the house, right there, in the window. I left that place the next morning. I didn't care about the deposit or the rest of the month. And sometimes, late at night, when I look out my own window, I still see a faint light swaying in the distance. But I never, ever go outside. It was supposed to be a peaceful hiking weekend. Just me and my partner, Lily. We'd mapped out a long-distance trail through the Welsh countryside. Hills, forests, old stone paths. No service. No stress. Exactly what we both needed. We hit the trail early, and by late afternoon, we were already halfway in. That's when the sky turned. Dark clouds rolled over the ridge fast, and within minutes, the wind kicked up and rain started coming down sideways. We weren't near any designated campsites, and our gear wasn't ready for a sudden downpour like that. We were thinking about turning back when we saw it, tucked in a hollow between two hills, a small stone cottage. Smoke from the chimney. Lights on inside. Lily pulled out the map. There was nothing marked there. No trail. No building. But it was real, and it looked warm. We decided to take a chance. The path to the cottage was muddy, but walkable. There was a wooden gate and an old stone wall covered in ivy. A dog was sitting in the yard, an old collie. It lifted its head but didn't bark, just watched us. We knocked. No answer. Knocked again. Still nothing. Then the front door creaked open, just a few inches. Unlocked. Inside, the fire was going strong. There was a kettle steaming on the stove and 2 mugs on the table. It felt like we were interrupting someone, but it also felt safe. Familiar almost. We called out a few more times before stepping in, just far enough to dry off by the hearth. Still no one. Lily found a notepad on the kitchen counter. Nothing written on it, just dust-free, like it had been wiped clean. We figured someone would be back soon. So we took off our wet jackets, dried our boots by the fire, and sat down. We fell asleep without meaning to. I woke up cold. The fire was out. The mugs were gone. And the kettle wasn't on the stove anymore. Everything looked older. I looked around and realized the room didn't match what we'd walked into. The furniture was faded, covered in a thin layer of dust. There were cobwebs in the corners. Lily was standing by the window. "Look outside," she said. The dog was gone. The garden, which had looked well kept before, was overgrown and full of brambles. Even the trees around the property looked dead somehow. And the house itself, it was falling apart. Cracks in the walls, broken roof tiles, mold on the windowsills. It didn't feel like the same place. And yet it was. We left immediately. Didn't even bother trying to figure it out. Just walked fast, packs half zipped, hearts pounding. About 2 hours later, we reached a small farmstead. I asked the farmer about the cottage in the hollow. He squinted at me for a long second and said, "There ain't no house down that way." We insisted, told him exactly where it was, described the dog, the fire, everything. He went quiet, then finally said, "That place burned down in 1978. Whole family inside. They never rebuilt. Road's been blocked off for decades." Lily looked at me, pale. I didn't believe it, until we got home and checked our photos. We had one from inside the house, taken before we fell asleep. You could see the fire, the old clock, Lily smiling, and in the hallway behind her, there was a man, standing in the shadows, barefoot, watching us. We never heard a sound. I never really believed in the strange stories people told about the woods near West Marrow. Old locals said you could hear bells tolling through the forest late at night, especially near a gnarled old tree with roots that twisted above the ground like knotted fingers. My partner Emily and I were staying in a rented cottage nearby for the weekend. We were both burned out from work, and the idea of quiet countryside and fresh air sounded perfect. Our host, an older man named Gerald, warned us not to go walking at night. "There's an old superstition about a tree that rings like a bell," he said. "People follow the sound and don't always come back right." We laughed it off, of course. I figured it was just something to entertain tourists. But the second night, around 2 a.m., I heard it. A soft, low toll in the distance. It echoed like a funeral bell, deep, steady, and deliberate. Emily sat up in bed beside me. "You hear that?" she whispered. We both listened. Toll. Then again. Toll. We got dressed, grabbed our flashlights, and followed the sound into the woods. The forest at night didn't feel like the same one we'd walked earlier that day. Everything was unnaturally still. No owls. No wind. Not even the crunch of leaves under our boots. Just the soft, pulsing toll echoing through the trees. We walked maybe half a mile before we found it. The tree. It stood dead center in a clearing. Towering. Bark blackened like it had been burned. No leaves. and hanging from the branches were what looked like rusted iron bells, dozens of them, swaying ever so slightly, even though there wasn't a breeze. But they weren't moving enough to make that sound. I stepped closer. The air was heavy, electric, like a storm was about to break. "Emily," I said quietly, "do you see this?" She didn't respond. When I turned, she wasn't behind me anymore. I spun around with the flashlight, calling her name. "Emily, Emily, where'd you go?" No response, just the tolling. Then I heard footsteps to my left, but when I shined the light, no one was there. I kept circling the tree, trying to stay calm, trying to listen past the ringing. That's when I saw it. Half buried in the soil near the roots was a backpack, covered in moss, weathered like it had been there for years. I knelt down and pulled it free. The zipper still worked. Inside were a few old photos, a wallet, and a faded notebook. The ID in the wallet said Jonas Whitmore. That was the name Gerald, the cottage owner, had mentioned in one of his stories. A hiker who'd vanished out here back in the 90s. Then tolling stopped, and I heard a voice whisper, right next to my ear, "You shouldn't have come alone." I ran. I don't know how far. I just kept moving until I saw the faint porch light of the cottage through the trees. When I got inside, I slammed the door and locked it behind me. But Emily was already sitting at the table. She looked pale, drenched, mud on her clothes. "Where were you?" I asked, breathless. "I turned around and you were gone." "I don't know," she said. "One second I was right behind you, and the next it was like the woods swallowed me. I couldn't even hear you calling." She said she'd seen shadows, heard voices whispering from the trees. Something had touched her shoulder, cold fingers. We were supposed to leave the next day, but we packed up and drove out that night. Back in the city, I looked up the forest, found an old article about disappearances, about people hearing tolling, and about a tree planted centuries ago as a hanging tree, later turned into a place of mourning. One line stuck with me: those who follow the tolling tree rarely return the same, and some not at all. That backpack, the voice in the woods, and the strangest part, when I went to show Emily the wallet I had taken from the roots, it was gone.